All right, this lecture is designed to give you a brief introduction to viruses so that when you all are doing your projects, you have a little bit of background so you know kind of what the heck you're looking up and talking about, okay? So let's get into it. What is a virus? Basically, a virus is just a little particle made of some type of nucleic acid and a protein covering. That's it. Okay. It's super duper small, right? Like tinier and simpler than eukaryotes and prokaryotes. It has no organelles. It's not even a cell. Okay. The smallest viruses are so small, they're smaller than ribosomes. Okay. So we're talking smaller than organelles. Super duper tiny. Barely visible under a microscope, even the largest ones. Okay. Super duper tiny. And so again, what they have is some type of nucleic acid in their core. It could be DNA. This DNA could be double or single stranded. Okay, this is where we might see a single stranded DNA or RNA. And this RNA could also be double or single stranded. And I know that we've learned that DNA or that RNA is usually single stranded, but viruses are funky. And so they can have some double stranded stuff. Okay. And that protein covering is called a capsid. Now, viruses come in a variety of different shapes, okay? Here are some of the names for like kind of the common shapes. A helical virus kind of looks like a long cylinder, okay? And has the nucleic acid in like a coil inside of it. Um, this one's polyhedral, where you kind of have like this weird kind of triangular pyramidish shape on the outside. Kind of like the dice and categories or something, if you've ever played that. Spherical, these are going to be in a sphere, obviously. And then these ones are called phages. And they kind of look like a weird little spider or something, right? Um, these are just some of the shapes, maybe not all of them, but most of the viruses that you'll be researching might fall into one of these shapes. So good to have seen them at least once, okay? And so, because they have no organelles, they can't replicate, right? They have no way to produce energy. They have no way to copy their genetic material. And so, the only way they can make more viruses is to go into a host cell. Okay. Now, not all viruses can infect everything. There are certain viruses that only infect certain species, right? So, for example, like kennel cough is a thing like a dog can get, but like humans, we don't need to worry about it because it only infects dogs, right? So like the West Nile virus is an example. It can infect humans, horses, birds, and mosquitoes. That's pretty wide, actually. There are some cold viruses that only infect humans, but even on top of that, do they affect like your stomach or your liver? No, they're affecting your respiratory tract, right? So viruses can be very specific to species or even specific to like a certain tissue or cell in that species. Okay. Um, so how do they actually infect things? So what happens is a virus is going to bind to that host cell, and it's going to take its nucleic acid, either the DNA or the RNA, and it's going to like insert it into the host cell. And then that host cell um, is going to copy that DNA or RNA, and it's going to also make the capsids, those shells. And then all of a sudden, they self assemble inside of the host cell. And then the viruses will bust out of the infected host cell, which either damages it or kills the host cell. And then those viruses go and try to find new cells. Pretty gnarly. Okay. So here's just a picture of it. So here's our virus. It puts its DNA into the host cell. Okay. That host cell is going to make a whole bunch of copies of the DNA. It's going to make a whole bunch of the capsids, and then they're going to assemble and come back out. Okay. Here's another picture. Here's a phage. Okay, so here it attaches. It's going to insert its blue DNA into this host cell here. And now it makes all the pieces of the phage, all the DNA, all the capsids, all the everything, the legs. It's going to assemble and boom, release. And this would like kill the cell, right? Look at it busting out. Gross. This is called like the Lytic cycle. Whenever a virus comes in and like hijacks the host and has the host make copies of itself and then they bust out and kill, this is called lytic, when it busts out and kills. Okay. Viruses do this, but sometimes viruses kind of hang in the background. Okay. So sometimes the phage can come and attach. And sometimes, like, let's say if the environmental conditions aren't right, it's not gonna like self-assemble right away. It's not gonna do that. It's gonna hang out and wait. Okay. And it's gonna like have its DNA inserted into the host cell and just like hang out for a bit. And so if that host cell makes copies, those copies will also have the virus DNA in there. And then when the environment is right, boom, all of a sudden that's going to kick into the Lytic cycle and it's going to make all the genome and the capsids and it's going to um, bust out of the cell and break the cell. So over here, this is the Lytic cycle, but this one is kind of laying in wait. This is a lysogenic cycle. One example of this is like Canker Sores. Okay, you have that virus. It's actually one of the herpes viruses in your body, like all the time. And just sometimes when your immune system gets down, all of a sudden, boop, it's like the perfect time for that virus to kind of wake up again. And then boom, you get a canker sore, right? But it's just always kind of laying in wait, waiting for you. So there's lots of viruses out there. Here are some of them on this slide here. And so what defenses do we have? Well, we've got our immune system, okay? So if a virus gets into your body, your immune system can recognize it and start to take it down. However, and we haven't learned the details of this, the immune system, but it can take 2 full weeks for your body to be able to completely fight off that virus and like take it down and clear it out. Um, and if this is just a cold virus, oh well, maybe you don't feel so well for a while, but that's okay. But if this is a virus that could cause like paralysis, like polio, that'd be a problem because you'd already be paralyzed by then, right? And so our main form of defense, other than our immune system against viruses, are vaccines. Okay. And vaccines basically are gonna poke your immune system, and that's gonna cause your immune system to like build up these defensive and memory cells, but it doesn't actually get you sick. And then when your body comes into contact with the thing, it's got like a whole army ready to go, and that army can attack that virus and kill it and get rid of it before you become infected and get sick. Okay, you'll be learning more about viruses soon. There's one special type of virus that's sometimes asked about on the AP Bio exam, and this is a retrovirus. Okay, so viruses can have DNA or RNA cores. RNA is pretty darn common. And one of the most common RNA viruses is called a retrovirus. Okay. And so what they do is once that retrovirus gets inside of the cell, there's going to be this enzyme called reverse transcriptase, which is going to take the RNA and make it into DNA. Okay. And then it's going to take that DNA and it's going to permanently insert itself into the host DNA. And forever and ever and ever, that host DNA, that host cell, and all of its daughter cells that it has from mitosis will always have that virus, that viral DNA inside of it. Okay. HIV is a retrovirus. Okay. It inserts itself into the host DNA, which is part of the reason why it's so hard to combat. Your body, your genome, your DNA is actually 5 to 8% viral DNA from retroviruses over the hundreds and thousands of years of evolution, inserting their DNA through your ancestors, which is kind of gnarly and cool to think about. Okay. One last thing about these RNA viruses is that remember how we talked about like with DNA, there's lots of proofreading going on so that any errors get fixed. Well, RNA viruses don't have that. So there's lots of mutations that occur. And so this means these viruses change very, very fast. And so, again, another part of why HIV is so hard to battle is that it's constantly changing. And so, if you make a medicine that works for one strain, then all of a sudden the next strain is already out and that medicine doesn't work on it because it's mutated. Okay, so that can be a big challenge. So sometimes the question is asked, are viruses alive? And the answer is probably no. Okay, they've got DNA or RNA, but they can't do any metabolic functions and they can't reproduce on their own. So most scientists say no, they're not alive, but they're kind of this weird gray zone. Like they're not alive, but they're like fully also not alive either because they do have genetic info, which is weird. So no question mark? They're not? So then that begs the question, where do they come from? Viruses basically infect every living thing that exists from simple to complicated. But since they depend on other things to reproduce, they must have come after those things probably. One idea is that there was just some like nucleic acid that was like came out of an injured cell and was maybe going to another and it got covered by a protein and that might have been like one of the first viruses, but honestly, we don't really know. Okay. So these are the main things for you to know and for you to be aware of. And in case you need more info, here's where we are in the book.